Breaking news. Construction permits filed with the General Services Administration reveal that FBI Director Kash Patel authorized a $2.1 million renovation project inside the J. Edgar Hoover building. The project was classified as a secure communications facility. But according to internal documents obtained by congressional investigators, the room has a different purpose and a very specific access list. 2 names: Kash Patel, Donald Trump. No one else. What followed that disclosure is what brings us here tonight. Because this is not a story about office renovations. This is a story about what happens when the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country builds a room that its own agents cannot enter. Let me walk you through what we know. The construction began in March 2025, approximately 3 weeks after Patel was confirmed as FBI director. Work orders show that a team of private contractors, not government employees, was brought in to complete the project. Those contractors were required to sign non-disclosure agreements before entering the building. The agreements were unusually broad, prohibiting them from discussing not just the room's specifications, but its location within the building. The project was completed in 47 days. Total cost, according to GSA records, $2,147,000. That figure includes specialized soundproofing, electromagnetic shielding, a dedicated air filtration system, and what the permits describe as enhanced counter-surveillance infrastructure. In plain language, the room was built so that nothing said inside could be heard, recorded, or intercepted by anyone outside. Here's where the story becomes unusual. Standard secure facilities within federal buildings, known as SIFs, follow established protocols. They are overseen by the intelligence community. They have documented access procedures. Multiple officials are typically authorized to enter. Logs are maintained. Reviews are conducted. This room does not follow those protocols. According to 3 current FBI employees who spoke on condition of anonymity, the room operates outside normal SCAF procedures. There is no access log available to FBI security personnel. There is no oversight from the Bureau's Internal Compliance Division. And when senior agents inquired about the facility's purpose, they were told it was above their clearance level. Above their clearance level. Inside their own headquarters. That phrase caught the attention of members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. In a closed-door session last week, committee staff asked FBI representatives to explain the room's function and access procedures. According to 2 sources familiar with the briefing, the FBI's response was that the facility was established under executive authority and that further details were classified. Executive authority. That phrase is doing significant work here. The FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president, but the Bureau itself operates under congressional oversight. Its budget is appropriated by Congress. Its activities are subject to review. When an FBI director claims executive authority to shield a facility from congressional inquiry, it raises questions about where the lines of accountability actually run. What stood out to several committee members was not just the secrecy, but the timing. The room became operational in late April 2025. Since then, according to building access records that were obtained through a Freedom of Information request, Donald Trump has visited FBI headquarters on at least 7 occasions. Those visits were not announced publicly. They did not appear on the president's official schedule. And in each case, the duration of the visit exceeded 3 hours. 3 hours. Inside FBI headquarters. With no public record of what was discussed or who else was present. The White House was asked about these visits on Tuesday. The press secretary confirmed that the president had visited the FBI, but declined to discuss the purpose of those visits, citing national security. When asked specifically about the secure room, she said she was not familiar with the facility being described. Not familiar. Despite $2.1 million in construction costs. Despite 7 presidential visits, despite congressional inquiries, that answer is either a lie or an admission that even the White House press office is being kept in the dark about what happens in that room. Here is what makes this different from ordinary government secrecy. Every administration has secure facilities. Every president conducts classified conversations. That is normal. What is not normal is building a facility specifically designed to exclude the oversight mechanisms that are supposed to apply to federal law enforcement. The FBI is not the president's personal security service. It is a law enforcement agency with a mandate to investigate crimes, including crimes committed by government officials. When the director of that agency builds a room where he and the president can speak without any record, without any oversight, without any accountability, it raises a question that should concern every American regardless of political affiliation. What are they discussing that requires this level of secrecy? And who is being protected from knowing? Documents show that the room's construction was funded through a discretionary account that does not require itemized reporting to Congress. That account is typically used for emergency security upgrades, not new construction. By classifying the project as a security enhancement rather than a capital improvement, Patel avoided the normal appropriations review that would have required him to explain the expenditure to congressional committees. That is not illegal, but it is unusual. And it suggests a deliberate effort to minimize scrutiny. Pause for a second. Let that sink in. The FBI director used a funding mechanism designed for emergencies to build a private meeting room for himself and the president. He brought in outside contractors bound by non-disclosure agreements. He excluded his own security personnel from access logs. He told senior agents the facility was above their clearance. And when Congress asked questions, he cited executive authority. Every step in that sequence was designed to prevent anyone from knowing what happens inside that room. Now let me tell you what current FBI employees are saying privately. According to interviews conducted by investigative journalists over the past 2 weeks, morale inside the Bureau has reached what one veteran agent described as a historic low. The secret room has become a symbol of something larger, the sense that the FBI is no longer operating as an independent law enforcement agency, but as an extension of presidential power. One agent who has served under 4 directors said he had never seen anything like this. He described a culture of fear inside the Bureau, where employees are afraid to ask questions, afraid to raise concerns, afraid to do anything that might attract attention from leadership. He said the room represents everything that has gone wrong since Patel took over. Another agent was more direct. She said the room exists for one reason, so Trump and Patel can discuss things they do not want anyone else to know about. She said the most logical explanation is that they are discussing investigations, possibly investigations involving the president himself or his allies. That possibility is what has congressional investigators most concerned. The FBI currently has open cases involving multiple individuals connected to the Trump administration. Those cases predate Patel's tenure. Under normal circumstances, the FBI director would be briefed on sensitive investigations, but would maintain appropriate distance to preserve the Bureau's independence. That independence is what allows the FBI to investigate powerful people without interference. If Trump and Patel are meeting privately to discuss active investigations, that would represent a fundamental breach of the separation between law enforcement and political power. It would mean the president has direct, unmonitored access to information about cases that could affect him or his associates. We do not know for certain that this is happening. The secrecy surrounding the room makes it impossible to know. And that is precisely the problem. Accountability requires transparency. When officials can meet in complete secrecy, with no records, no oversight, and no explanation, accountability becomes impossible. The room is not just a physical space. It is a black hole in the architecture of democratic governance. Here is why this matters to you personally. You pay for the FBI. Your taxes fund its operations, including the $2.1 million that built this room. You have a right to expect that the agency operates according to law, with appropriate oversight, in service of justice rather than political convenience. When the FBI director builds a facility specifically designed to evade that oversight, he is using your money to hide things from you. When the president visits that facility 7 times without any public record, he is conducting the business of government in a way that you are not permitted to know about. This is not about classified sources and methods. This is not about protecting national security. This is about 2 men creating a space where they can do whatever they want without anyone watching. And the question every American should be asking is simple. What are they doing in there that requires this level of secrecy? The Senate Intelligence Committee has requested a classified briefing on the room's purpose and access procedures. That request was made 3 weeks ago. As of today, it has not been fulfilled. Committee members have been told that scheduling conflicts have prevented the briefing from taking place. 3 weeks of scheduling conflicts for a matter that multiple senators have described as urgent. Meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee has sent a letter to Patel demanding all documents related to the room's construction, funding, and access protocols. The deadline for that production is February 14th. If the FBI does not comply, the committee has indicated it will consider issuing subpoenas. But here is what concerns investigators most. If the room was built specifically to avoid creating records, what documents would even exist to produce? If conversations inside are never logged, never transcribed, never summarized, then there is nothing to subpoena. The secrecy is self-reinforcing. The absence of evidence is built into the design. That is what makes this different from other controversies. This is not a case where investigators can follow a paper trail. The room was built to ensure there is no paper trail. Whatever happens inside stays inside. And that brings us to the most disturbing possibility. What if the room is being used to coordinate the very activities that Congress is trying to oversee? What if investigations are being discussed, targets identified, strategies developed, all in a space designed to be invisible to the mechanisms of accountability? We do not know that this is happening, but we cannot know that it is not happening either. The room exists precisely to make that knowledge impossible. Several former FBI officials have spoken publicly about their concerns. One former assistant director said the room represents a betrayal of everything the Bureau is supposed to stand for. He said the FBI's power comes with responsibility, and that responsibility requires transparency. When you start building rooms to hide from oversight, he said, you have lost your way. Another former official was more pointed. She said the room looks like preparation for something. She said people do not spend $2.1 million to have casual conversations. They spend that money when they need to discuss things that would be damaging if discovered. Preparation for something. That phrase has been echoing through Washington since this story broke. What is being prepared? What conversations require this level of protection? What is so sensitive that even senior FBI agents cannot be trusted to know about it? Those questions do not have answers yet. They may never have answers if this secrecy holds. And that uncertainty is itself a form of damage to public trust. The FBI asks Americans to trust it with extraordinary powers. The power to investigate, the power to surveil, the power to charge. That trust is supposed to be earned through accountability, through oversight, through the knowledge that the Bureau operates within legal limits. When the director builds a room to escape that accountability, he is asking for trust while actively undermining the basis for it. He is saying, trust me, but do not ask what I am doing. Trust me, but do not expect to know. Trust me, but accept that some things are none of your business. That is not how trust works in a democracy. That is how trust works in an autocracy. The next several weeks will determine whether the story fades or escalates. The House deadline is February 14th. The Senate is still waiting for its briefing. Investigative journalists are continuing to interview current and former employees. And somewhere inside FBI headquarters, the room sits waiting for its next visitor. The access list has 2 names. The construction cost $2.1 million. The conversations inside are completely invisible. And the only people who know what happens there are the 2 people who build it to keep everyone else out. This is not opinion. These are documented expenditures, documented construction permits, documented presidential visits. The paper trail exists up to the door of that room. After that, there is only silence. What happens in that silence is the question that congressional investigators are trying to answer. It is the question that former FBI officials are publicly worrying about. It is the question that current agents are whispering about in hallways. And it is the question that you, as a taxpayer and a citizen, have every right to ask. What is in the room? If you want to know when those documents are released, if you want to follow what happens when the deadline passes, subscribe now. Because this story is just beginning. The room is built. The meetings are happening. And somewhere in that silence, decisions are being made that affect every American. The only question is whether we will ever be allowed to know what those decisions are, or whether the room will keep its secrets forever. Let me give you some historical context, because what is happening here is not without precedent, and the precedents are not reassuring. During the Nixon administration, the White House established what became known as the Plumbers Unit. It was a secret group operating outside normal channels, designed to conduct operations that could not be traced back to the president. The Plumbers eventually broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. That break-in led to Nixon's resignation. The pattern is familiar. Secret operations, deniable channels, rooms where conversations happen off the record. The architecture of scandal is always the same. Create a space where accountability cannot reach. This is not to say that Trump and Patel are planning anything comparable to Watergate. We do not know what they're planning, if anything. But the infrastructure they've built, a room designed to be invisible to oversight, is exactly the kind of infrastructure that has enabled abuses of power in the past. And here is what makes the current situation potentially worse. Nixon's plumbers operated out of the Executive Office building. They were connected to the White House, not to law enforcement. When the FBI eventually investigated Watergate, it was able to do so because the Bureau maintained its independence from presidential control. The room Patel built is inside the FBI itself. If the president wants to discuss how to use the FBI for his own purposes, he now has a place to do it where no FBI agent can hear. The fox has not just entered the henhouse. He has built himself a soundproof office inside it. Consider what the FBI has access to: surveillance capabilities, informant networks, ongoing investigations into political figures, criminal evidence against potential witnesses, the ability to open cases, close cases, slow walk cases, or accelerate them. All of that power is now connected through a secret room directly to the president. And no one is watching what happens when they meet. Former federal prosecutors have been unusually vocal about their concerns. One who served under 3 administrations said this arrangement makes it impossible to know whether the FBI is operating independently or taking direction from the White House on specific cases. He said the room is not just a symbolic problem. It is an operational one. Another former prosecutor put it more bluntly. She said if she were a defense attorney representing someone being investigated by the FBI, she would immediately file motions demanding to know whether the president had discussed that case with the director. She said the existence of the room creates a presumption of improper coordination that will hang over every significant FBI case for years. Think about what that means. The room does not just affect what happens inside the FBI. It affects the legitimacy of everything the FBI does. Every prosecution becomes suspect. Every investigation carries an asterisk. Every conviction can be challenged on the grounds that the process may have been corrupted by secret presidential involvement. That is the institutional damage. Now let me talk about the personal damage. You may not think this affects you directly. You are not being investigated by the FBI. You are not a political figure or a journalist or a whistleblower. But the integrity of federal law enforcement affects everyone. When the FBI loses credibility, criminals benefit. When oversight disappears, corruption flourishes. When the president can secretly direct investigations, the rule of law erodes for everyone, not just for the powerful people who make headlines. And there is an even more direct way this affects you. The $2.1 million spent on that room came from the FBI's budget. That budget is funded by taxpayers. By you. Every dollar spent on soundproofing and electromagnetic shielding and counter-surveillance equipment is a dollar that did not go to fighting crime in your community. FBI field offices across the country have reported budget constraints. Agents have been denied training. Equipment has gone unreplaced. Investigations have been understaffed. And meanwhile, $2.1 million was spent building a room so the director and the president can talk without anyone listening. That is your money. Those are your priorities being ignored. That is your safety being treated as less important than their secrecy. Here is what we know for certain. The room exists. The construction permits are public record. The $2.1 million expenditure is documented. 7 presidential visits have been logged. The access list includes 2 names and no others. Everything else is unknown. The conversations are secret. The purposes are classified. The oversight is non-existent. And that gap between what we know and what we cannot know is exactly where abuses of power thrive. The next several weeks will determine whether this story fades or escalates. The House deadline is February 14th. The Senate is still waiting for its briefing. Investigative journalists are continuing to interview current and former employees. And somewhere inside FBI headquarters, the room sits waiting for its next visitor. What is in the room? If you want to know when those documents are released, if you want to follow what happens when the deadline passes, subscribe now. Share this video, because this story is just beginning. The room is built. The meetings are happening. And somewhere in that silence, decisions are being made that affect every American. The only question is whether we will ever be allowed to know what those decisions are, or whether the room will keep its secrets forever. The deadline is February 14th. Mark your calendar. Because what happens after that deadline will tell us whether oversight still means anything in America, or whether some rooms are simply too secret to open.